Good morning,
slower.
everyone. Time being 10:05, I would ask Representative Sellers to lead us in the pledge. He's been practicing. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So a couple of quick announcements. One is on the exec session that is scheduled for 1 o'clock. Due to a number of circumstances, most of which had to do with the availability of amendments that have been promised and or working on and not received as yet, we're going to forego the exec session this afternoon. I thought there would be wild applause with that, but I'll keep going. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's a little late now. So that would mean that we have 3 hearings this morning, and then we will move the exec session virtually in its entirety, as I look at it quickly, to the 14th next week, next Wednesday. And then once we do that, if we include the bills that we're hearing today, that would mean we only would have one additional bill, which is the Legislative Youth Advisory Bill, and then we're done for this, for the House bills. We would be then done through March 14th when crossover, and then we go from there. Yep, Rep. Payer. Yes. So the whole world hears what you say.
Thank you. Is it possible that we could do the executive session on the 14th starting at 9 a.m.?
I will take that under advisement. I think there were a couple people. Well, how do those? Well,
Instead of the
we usually
afternoon.
have been doing them in the afternoon, but I don't know of any reason. I think there are actually a couple people in your caucus that have difficulty for 9.
Or maybe even 10.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure. We generally don't have a great deal of discussion, so I don't think it would be. I'll work this all through. But
Thanks.
I'm perfectly happy to fit in with whatever we're doing.
So,
I'll leave it up to Representative Sheehan.
So, Mr. Chair, that was moving the exec session from the afternoon to the morning. I didn't hear you.
Yeah, we haven't put it in the calendar as yet for the 14th.
Okay,
That'd
be great.
Actually, we should do that by noontime today. All right. Great suggestion, great point. Let's move from there. We have 3 hearings today, and that does eliminate all of the hearings we have on our House bills. And even those are kind of just partly discussion today as hearings. There will be additional information coming on, I think, all of them. That being said, I will open the hearing on House Bill 1030 and recognize the prime sponsor, who happens to be our vice chair. And you will need a pink card, which is kind of odd, but true. And if you would bring another one back so that I can use it for the next committee. Good morning, Representative Sheehan, prime sponsor of House Bill 1030.
Good morning.
could you please introduce yourself for the YouTube?
I'm Representative Vanessa Sheehan, and I represent Hillsborough 43, the town of Milford. HB 1030, I drafted this bill basically as a placeholder bill. As you know, Representative Wall and I were appointed to the Special Committee on Commissions by the Speaker to look through commissions that are no longer needed. And so, if you remember, a couple months ago, we passed SB 84 unanimously out of this committee with, we replaced all of the original language of SB 84 with amendments that would sunset some of the committees that we found were inactive in that Special Committee on Commissions, as well as a couple other amendments that we were asked to place in the bill by Legislative Services. And that SB 84 passed our House and is now in the other body waiting to be acted on, and it hasn't yet. So we would like to draft an amendment to 1030, replacing all with the same language we just passed, SB 84, with all of that language being put into 1030, passing it again out of the House, sending it over to the other body, just in case. So that's the plan with HB 1030. And I'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you. Are there questions? I can help explain some of the process maybe for our newer members. So SB 84, when the House amended SB 84, we send it back amended, and the Senate has the option of concurring, non-concurring, or asking for a committee of conference. They take those up as House messages that come to the Senate. As yet, they have not taken up that message. So we really don't know, and to be honest, I'm not sure completely of Senate rules. They may have the ability within their rules to not take it up at all, and in that case, it would die on the table. By doing the process that Representative Sheehan mentions, by loading it onto, or the language onto this House bill and passing it in the full House, it would then go over during crossover as a House bill, and it would have to be assigned to one of the Senate committees, so it would actually force getting a hearing in the Senate, where the other process, it may not get that attention. So that hopefully alleviates some of the questions you have, but if there are further questions, seeing none, I think you're, Representative Hobson.
Thank you for taking my question. I'm a little confused as to why, I'm confused as to why it wouldn't be taken up by the other body if we sent it over there. Do you know what I'm saying? What?
I don't know what their reasonings would be.
Not many of us know the inner workings of the body on the other side of the wall. Sometimes it's asking the unknowable. Further questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Representative
Thank you.
Sheehan. I have no other pink cards for this bill, and there's no good asking if anyone in the audience has further questions. So with that, we'll close the hearing on House Bill 1030. The next hearing is due for 10:30. We expected much more conversation. So you've got 10 minutes to stretch. Thanks very much.
It is 10:35, and I'd like to open up the hearing for HB 1388. And Representative Hill, welcome to Ledge Administration.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's always a pleasure to be at Legislative Administration. No, really, it is.
Could you please introduce yourself so we know who you represent? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I am Representative Greg Hill. I serve the community of Northfield, which is Merrimack 2. I'm here this morning to discuss with you House Bill, and introduce House Bill 1388. It may look, that bill may look very familiar to you because it is the bill that we put forth last January as a retained bill to House Bill 301 in its entirety. What I'm proposing to you, or let me just back up a second. The reason that House Bill 301 was tabled in January was at my request. We had conversations with members of the Ethics Committee about House Bill 301, and they pointed out some very good things that they were uncomfortable with, and or language that they would like to have changed. So at that time, we had one of two options. We could have passed House Bill 301 and worked on an amendment that would be brought to the Senate. And or we could have worked on a fast amendment and brought it to the floor as a floor amendment in the House. It was our judgment that that kind of a conversation on something as important as our ethics guidelines and laws was too important to try to have a conversation on the floor of the House. And we also recognized that we had the opportunity, because Legislative Administration was holding House Bill 1388, we had the ability to amend House Bill 1388 in any way we wanted and bring the actual bill, after it passes the House floor, to the Senate in a joint venture with the House Ethics Committee. So that was the route we took. We tabled House Bill 301, and then we sat back down with the Ethics Committee people, and one of which is on our committee now, and we hammered out where differences were. We talked about language, and it turned out that we were working in pretty similar lines. We just had different ways of getting to the same spot. So what you have in front of you right now are two options, and I've labeled them purposely option A and option B without anyone knowing, except for me, which is which. And what I would ask the committee is for them to, or for you to consider the two of them and decide which of those would be more understandable, more readable, more given the ability to follow by your colleagues and yourselves. So we will not, my understanding is we will not be executing that bill today. And so this would be something that you can ponder or consider for the next week or so. And one of both these options, you'll notice they're not in the form of amendments as yet. They will be converted to amendments and brought back to the committee prior to the executive session. So any changes that you see can be made prior to going for amendments. But I should just point out that really the two areas that that are different, and one is the idea of including the phrase or the two words special interest. Um, special interest is well, um, is defined in our current ethics book, and it means, according to this definition here, any financial or non-financial personal interest. And it's under the definition of conflict of interest. So a conflict of interest is a special interest, and it means any financial or non-financial personal interest. That's what one option A has. Option B simply goes from conflict of interest definition and says a conflict of interest means any financial or non-financial personal interest. So it deletes the phrase special interest entirely. The only other change, or the only other point of difference, is I have to find it, in the exceptions for recusal for conflict of interest, and it's a percentage change. So one of them requires that if a legislator or the legislator's household members' ownership of securities is less than 1%, then you're exempt. The other says if it's 5%, you're exempt. And the reason that those two exist is, all of us, I think it's fair to say, hold some kind of retirement income, whether it's in a company pension, whether it's in our own mutual funds, whether it's in our own IRAs, anything like that. It was, and this didn't exist, by the way, in our House Bill 301, the original one. So this is one of the things that we held that up for purposely. But the question is, at what level does that, do you need to own some percentage of the outstanding shares of a mutual fund or of an underlying company before you would, it would be subject to a conflict of interest? Gets a little technical. But that's really the only two differences between option A and option B. I think with that, I'll end my testimony. I'm happy to answer any questions that may come up, but certainly I want to make sure everyone understands that this is only sections 3 and 4 of a multi-part section in your booklet, but these are the only places that this bill is dealing with, and these are the only places that there were differences between what the Health Ethics Committee wanted and what I, as a representative of the legislative administration, wanted. So just that's where it sits.
Are there any questions from the committee? Rep. Sellers?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is option A and option B, and I'm not sure I can even ask this question of you, but I'm going to ask it and you can just say no. Do you prefer one over the other?
No, I don't. They do. I would be happy with either. And that was the interesting part, and I'm happy that you asked the question. As much as it pained me to table House Bill 301, because it was presented to me that there were wide differences with how the ethics committee was looking at 301. And then once we tabled it and we sat down and hammered out line by line, turned out we were very close. And I think that surprised the ethics committee people as much as it did me, or maybe more so. So at this point, I really don't have a preference. I think, and I agree with the original sponsors of 301 and the prior two iterations before that, that came from the chair of ethics committee. We've not had recusal in our guidelines prior to this. And I think it's fair to say we have all seen circumstances where that make it imperative that we do address. So both of these will accomplish that. Long-winded answer to saying yes, but
Representative McCarter?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. Does this, I obviously don't have HB 301 in its entirety in front of me, but does this eliminate the ability for someone to just declare their intent to vote on a particular issue anyway? Is this saying that they must recuse regardless of their intent being noticed? I'm not sure I understand that process.
sure. So this is only dealing with those with a conflict of interest. And this is only dealing with conflicts of interest when there is either a financial or a non-financial conflict. If you have one of those, and they're clearly defined which category it is, either financial or non-financial, it does say shall. So you shall recuse in that case. Does that answer your question? Okay, thank you.
Yes, and Rep. McCarter, HB 1388 is the language of HB 301. So if you wanted to read the full, all the language, it's right there. Any other questions? Rep. Hobson, yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking my question. It seems as if on option B, non-financial personal interest on the backside really outlines the member exists when a legislator or household member has a responsibility for the welfare of an organization. That's pretty descriptive. More so than I feel this has been in the past. In other words, I think it outlines that there is a responsibility there. So, am I reading that right? It feels as if some things that I might have questioned before are not a question now, because I might not be responsible for the welfare of an organization. Do I have that right?
Thank you for your question. First, let me point out that language is the same in both options. Option A has it on the second page, on the back of that, at the top under B. Right? And what it gets to, and I'm kind of glad we didn't use the phrase fiduciary responsibility, but that's what that responsibility is getting to. When you are part of an organization and you're an officer, or you have responsibility for the finances, and that's what they're getting to with welfare. If you're more than just a member of the Elks, not to pick on one organization or another, but if you are an officer of the Elks, you have direction of how the Elks operate, and that's what this is getting to. It wouldn't be if you were just, you know, a card-carrying member of any organization. Does that help?
I have a follow-up. Um, So, responsibility for the welfare or welfare of an organization or the outcome is, I'm trying to establish a relationship between that term and advocating. It seems that they're two different definitions, I guess, two different scenarios. So do I have that right? And
Yes.
we as representatives occasionally have passions and things that we advocate for, but that's not necessarily the responsibility for the welfare outcome of a welfare for an organization. That, boy, did I mess that up, but you get where I'm going?
Yes, you have that. Yeah, it's not simply being a member. The point here in both is that you're not you wouldn't have a conflict simply being a member. You would have to have more than that level. You would have to be again an officer or someone that deals with the finances of that organization, something like that.
Rep. Costable?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking the question. I don't know if it was not, the way I'm reading that is that fiduciary is in it is in the paragraph. The way I read it is the welfare of the organization is tied to by virtue of holding a fiduciary position. So if you have no fiduciary responsibilities, then you're not covered under non-financial interest. Am I getting that correct?
Yes, you are. And you said it much better than I did. So
Rep. Pearson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just making sure, okay. They're in both. Option A and option B both use the term official legislative activity. Can you help us out with a definition of that?
I think that is original language. Actually, I think if you have your purple book with you, there's an actual definition in there. I think rudimentary, I could just say that it's any of the legislative activities that we normally do here as representatives and across the wall as senators, voting, submitting legislation, talking about legislation, debating, anything that a legislator would normally do.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this would be Roman numeral 11 on page 3 for those following in their hymnals. The official activities are activities which relate to official responsibilities, including the introduction of legislation, testifying before any legislative committee or state agency, voting in committee or in House and Senate session, or otherwise participating in influencing, or attempting to influence any decision of the legislature. So then we have, as a legislator, then you are surrendering your rights as a citizen of the state to even testify on a bill. If I'm reading this, am I reading this correctly?
You may be reading it correctly. Thank you for your question. I think you're wordsmithing it differently than I would. Again, this ethics is dealing with us and how we operate ourselves and how we are perceived and by the public. So rather than saying we're surrendering, I think I would be saying we are agreeing that we need to hold ourselves to a different standard than surrendering.
Any other questions? Rep. Constable.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking the question. Do you have a preference on the percentages for ownership and on the stocks? Because on one hand, 1% sounds like a small number, but 1% of a publicly traded larger company is a tremendous amount of ownership in terms of a publicly traded company. At the same time, there are some publicly traded companies that are very small, or very like 1% seems to me versus 5% seems too much to me. You could have 3% ownership, and that could be very substantial for a company. Do you have you thought about this at all, or the percentages and?
I think it's fair to say I've thought about this. In my real life, I am a financial advisor and or pension specialist, number of things. The 5% number does come a number of times in a number of places in federal law. For instance, if you're trying to determine if someone is a key employee of an organization, of a company, 5% is the number that the IRS uses as if you're 5% owner, then you are deemed a highly compensated individual, regardless of your compensation. So I guess your point is correct that depending on the organization, 1% or 5% can vary tremendously. But I think one of these is just by using common numbers that are used in other areas of finance, and you could say that it's arbitrary or it's based on just a feeling. I think you can argue either way.
Rep. Pearson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Hill, for taking the gauntlet here. By virtue of office, and I think that holds true for all of us, we are county delegation folks, right, as well. I am, but I sit on the executive board of Rockingham County. Do I now have a situation where if we're making or we're dealing with legislation that involves counties or monies being dispersed to counties, because I sit on the executive board of the county as part of the county delegation, do I now have to, under this, recuse myself from county operations when it comes to state legislation because the state does do a lot of funding for counties? I'm not just a member of the Rockingham County, like Rep. Hobson
I
is,
understand.
but
Yep.
I'm actually on the executive board.
Yep,
That-
I understand. I'm not. I guess I would answer that two ways. One is as my personal belief, but understand that I am not going to say that my personal beliefs will 100% align with any requests that you may or may not make to the Ethics Committee for a ruling. So that there are certainly going to be circumstances where someone needs to have clarified their individual position. This is not meant to be the litmus test that an individual rep may decide. If there are circumstances like that, it may be that we do need to have the Ethics Committee rule and you've seen any number of those that are printed in the calendar. But my personal belief is, even though you're on the executive committee, and your name is on the county budget, with a signature, I would say that you're acting, almost as the, the signator to what the county delegates are doing. So you're taking their information and you're signing off on it as the executive committee. You're not specifically making the budget for the county. I'd have to think this through. I mean, but that's my knee-jerk reaction. I'm not sure. And I will be frank with you that while we were doing the language here, we weren't anticipating other government agencies, monopolies, that we deal with, like county. We were more concerned with someone that worked for an organization, a private or nonprofit organization, rather than another government. I do think that someone from ethics may be coming up after me. I don't know if there's a pink card or not, but that may be a better place to ask that question. I'm not sure, but that would be my personal belief.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you. More to come.
And do we have any other speakers on HB 1388? Seeing none, I will close the hearing for House Bill 1388.
Good morning. Welcome to Legislative Administration and a hearing on House Bill 1479 FN. Time being 11:05, I would recognize the prime sponsor, Representative Yokella.
Thank you, Chair and members of Legislative Administration Committee. I am here today to
Could you-
introduce HB.
Can I
For-
interrupt for a second? Can
Yeah.
you please introduce yourself
Oh,
for the
yes, absolutely.
YouTube membership?
Thank you.
Thanks.
My name is Representative Josh Yokella. I represent the District of Rockingham 32, representing Fremont, Danville, and Brentwood. And it's my first time in this presenting to this committee, so that's a pleasure.
Welcome.
Thank you. So I'm here to introduce HB 1479. And I want to start off with that the government is here to serve the people. And the people have the right to free speech. Governments do not. Governments are servants of the people. And when people want change, the government should be able to give facts about the impact of change, but not advocate one way or the other. Lobbying with taxpayer money is compelled speech. The Supreme Court has held that that it's a violation of your First Amendment rights for the government to make you say something that you don't want to say. However, what I am forced, and we all are forced to fund, is someone to say something that you may not agree with. For example, like Jehovah's Witnesses do not lobby, vote for political parties or candidates, or run for government office, or participate in any action to change government for religious reasons, and their taxes are used to fund speech they oppose. So in addition to a violation of free speech, this is a violation of their exercise of religion by allowing this to continue. This bill is just taking the current language that I passed out to you, since this is a complete replace of that language. It's taking that current language, getting rid of the loopholes, and giving it some teeth. I have heard some concerns about the bill, like NHMA is giving a valuable resource of information. However, NHMA still could come to give information about the impacts. It would just have to withhold whether their opinion about whether we should support or oppose such legislation, unless they segregate the money that they wanted to use for lobbying from other taxpayer money. And that could be from sources like their trainings, where you pay additional fee to go to their training. That isn't taxpayer money. That is fee for service, right? And so they could use that money for lobbying, or they could hold a bake sale, or any other way to gather money other than taxpayer, forced contributions. And I have been a part of those NHMA policy setting committee and advocated for them to not oppose legislation created to limit municipalities from violating constitutional rights. And the response is other groups advocate for the protection of rights. We are here to advocate for the municipalities' interests. They advocate for the power to institute rent control in municipal and county government committee. They advocate to allow those municipalities to discriminate based on familial status in some of the recent bills in my committee. There are many cases of municipal overreach from municipalities passing an ordinance that says that if you want to be a tattoo artist in their town, that you have to be a licensed medical doctor. There is a town in this state that would give children a $250 or $275 fine for feeding or chasing waterfowl, like on the beach. That's what we want. And then also they do stuff like forbidding carrying around unopened alcoholic beverages on any street, sidewalk, alley, public or semi-public parking lot or any public space because they're just bad at writing laws because they forgot to limit it to only open containers. As we sit in this committee room today, lobbying as the law that I passed out with state money is not allowed. In fact, most, if not all, municipalities receive state money, whether that be education trust funds or highway block grants or meals and rooms tax. And according to RSA 15.5, currently, they are not allowed to lobby with that money. And if they don't segregate that money from their other money in a separate bank account, not just on their books, all of that money then counts as state money, and they're not allowed to use any of it for lobbying. So I reached out to my town administrator and verified that they're not segregating their money that they receive from the state for money that they can use for lobbying and money that they can't use for lobbying. So I believe that all the municipalities, I think that it's common practice, and I think that all municipalities think that they're above this law. I think that all the municipalities are in violation of the current RSA 15.5. And I passed around a letter that I'm going to be giving to the Attorney General to have the Attorney General investigate every single municipality and find out if they are segregating their funds as required by this law, because as I got a letter from my municipality saying that they're one of the reasons why they want to be able to donate to NHMA is that they want advocacy services at the State House. They want lobbying as part of their dues. It's not just for training. It's not just for legal services. They want lobbying. And that is a violation of their law if they're not currently in compliance. And so I'm going to be sending that request over to the AG's office after this testimony today. And I think that this law that I'm putting in, like if they are found to be in non-compliance, all the AG will do is say cease and desist. Just send them a letter. What I believe that they should be doing is not doing any of that with any of the taxpayer fund money, not just the money that they got from the state. And so I want this law will be clear that it's going to be applying to them, and then also it imposes penalties. If they don't comply, it's not just going to be a letter. They're actually going to be charged with the crime for misusing the taxpayers' money for things that they're not allowed to be doing. And so for that reason, I hope that you will join me in supporting HB 1479, and I am open to any questions.
I'm going to bet that there are one or two. Thank you for your testimony. Do I see hands for questions from the committee? Representative Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for taking my question. So, and part of the section 15.5 you're pointing out, in state funds, I might be confused. That's why I'm asking. State funds and municipal, aren't they two separate things?
Thank you for the question. State funds, I've asked NHMA before about why do they segregate, and they said no, because they don't receive any state funds. However, if you look at 15.5 Roman 2, that if they want to use state fund or other funds that are not state funds, they have to be in a separate bank account. And so once you put them into the same bank account, they are essentially all tainted as state funds. So if the municipalities do not currently have separate funds, all their money becomes state funds according to the current law on the books. And they're not allowed to use any of that for lobbying. And so that is the basis of my my concern today. Thank you for the question.
Further questions? I have one for you. Can you, do you have an opinion of whether this legislation, and perhaps even 15.5, but specifically on your legislation, should it be in a different section of law? And the reason I'm asking, I guess, is whether this seems to be a prohibition on the lobby. It's in the lobbyist section, 15.5. Is it not more, or would it not be better placed in the cities and towns sections, because it's a prohibition on the cities and towns and what they can do rather than what the lobbyists can do?
Thank you for the question. I think that the lobbyist section actually kind of makes sense, because when the person, first of all, in paragraph 2, I thought it references this, I thought it referenced like this paragraph. No, maybe it doesn't. I think that when the person is coming to lobby, they are the one that could be creating the violation, right? So if the town pays someone and hires them and they have to go register as a lobbyist, and then they see this law and they will say, wait a minute, I just got paid from a municipality, or I just got paid, this money is coming from somewhere else. That is where they would be like, hey, I could be in violation, because you're not really in violation until you come and lobby, right?
I'm giving myself a follow-up. How would the lobbyist know whether the money came from the bake sale? Thank you, Representative Pearson, for confirmation.
I think that's a fair question.
It's
I'm
really
not,
a technical point
Sure.
more than anything else.
Sure.
It's just an observation. I wondered whether you contemplated putting it in or filing it in.
I did
different
not,
areas.
because we're essentially, I use a lot of the language in my bill from the current 15.5,
Right.
and so obviously conflicting statutes, so I would have to repeal it and put it in a different section, and
Right.
so that was, I think, outside the scope of what I was intending.
I appreciate your answer.
Thank you.
Further questions, Representative Tierney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. I'm also a selectman
Sure.
in the town I live in. I have a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers in that town,
Mhm.
not to waste their money. NHMA gives me legal advice
Right.
for a minor fee, I believe, of around $1,200 a year. Any amount of questions I want to ask. If I have to go to the town attorney, it's $300 to $600 an hour. So I'm going to get anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. That's it. And then I'm paying more money.
Mhm.
That is not showing a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers. That's charging them for asking reasonable questions. NHMA does it for free.
Thank you. I would believe that as I would believe that as a budget committee member and a ZBA member in my town, that I've reached out for NHMA's legal advice, but that is not lobbying, so that's not within the scope of this bill. If NHMA stopped lobbying today, they would still be able to give you those services, whether or not this bill passed. So that's information is not that barred by this, so that's kind of outside of the scope of this as being influenced by this legislation. So
I have
thank
a follow-up question.
How would I track all the bills going through the House or the Senate? NHMA does that for me. Even as a member, I can't track all the bills going through that. Does this one pertain to a town? Does this one have an impact on a town? They're going through dozens of committees up here.
Thank you for the question. Once again, that information that they give to the towns about interested bills that they would be is not lobbying. That's just providing information. It's when they come up here and say, kill this bill, don't vote for that bill, vote for that bill. That is what lobbying is. So they would still be able to provide updates, monthly updates or whatever, as they do from time to time, as far as definitely when the legislative session is over and the law changes, they would still be able to do those updates. So thank you for the question.
Further questions? Representative Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I know we're picking on NHMA because as an example.
Yeah.
Since we're using them, can you tell me, is NHMA free? And how do they determine, if not, do you know how they determine?
I do have a pink card from NHMA.
Yeah, they will
Okay,
be
all right,
happy
Good
to.
for them.
I just asked.
Yeah.
Is it free?
It's not, and it's based on your population. So less population, less money.
Further questions? I have another one.
Sure.
Section 5, Roman 5 says, notwithstanding any other provision of law, any person who knowingly authorizes. Who is that person? Is that the selectman? Is that the town administrator? Is that someone else? How would that be determined, and who decides who's paying the fee?
Sorry. Thank you for the question. I believe that the person responsible would be the selectmen. They get a notice of all kind of the checks that are going to be written, and they approve that. And so I think it's the governing body, not necessarily the select board, depending on governing body of the town would be the responsible party.
So if it's a 3-person select board and one doesn't vote for it, is that person not liable? Is that how that would work?
Thank you for the question. If they refrain from voting for it, I would believe that they're not culpable. Yeah, but I think that the select board kind of makes an action all as a collective body or not, right?
So thank you.
I think it would be the person that literally signed authorized the signing of the check, yeah, or signed the check. Or if that is not the governing body, then it would be the person signing the check would be the responsible person, right?
Okay. Representative Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We're not trying to make this a conversation, by the way, too.
Sure.
So, yeah.
But I'm leading off what you were saying there because it's interesting. Because if I was one of the fathers or mothers there at the town, running the town, once I hand that money over to that company that might be helping us, like NHMA,
Sure.
I'm thinking they're helping me in the town as far as legal advice and whatnot.
Right.
If they separate or don't separate, I have no clue. So the punishment shouldn't be on me. It should be on the NHMA or the one that receives the money for not.
Well, thank you for the question. If you're not contracting services for lobbying, then you would just be doing a appropriation, and they would be the responsible party for receiving an appropriation of state money, right? So they have the same responsibility once they're receiving that state money.
Representative Payer.
Hello, good morning. I'm just curious, could you just briefly tell us the why? Why did you bring this bill forward? I'm just curious of
The why?
Why? Yeah. Why? What's it?
Because I think it's whether the examples that I gave, that I found that it was unreasonable that the city or the town actually in this example made a request or made this regulation that tattoo artists be medical doctors. I think that's inappropriate, and I would like to advocate for restrictions so that they can't abuse their power. And I believe that I should not have to pay for funding my opposition, which will come out and say, no, they, it was an honest mistake, or whatever the reason is. We should be able to have just unlimited power at the municipality. And I don't want that advocated using my money. So and I'm sure you will hear some testimony today from people that don't want their money advocating for things that they oppose also. So thank you.
Last one, I promise. Public funds, no
Sure.
public funds. You mentioned the bake sale.
Sure.
Does the bake sale become public funds once it's in the coffers of the town or the municipality? This is talking about in Roman 2, or is it 3? No public funds shall be used, and it defines public funds as a grant or appropriation. So only money that comes through taxation. Does it not apply to fees or dog licenses or bake sales? Does that not apply?
Thank you for the question. I was and the opportunity to clarify. When I was making that example, I was giving the example that NHMA could still lobby if they held a bake sale. They aren't tax. They aren't the government, right? Or if they did a training, which they do, and you sometimes have to pay for that service, right? Those monies would not be coming from from taxpayer. Right?
I apologize. I misunderstood.
They would
But getting back to my question,
Sure.
are public funds, do they become public funds as soon as they're in the coffers of the?
So thank you for making the opportunity for me to clarify that. Yeah. So this, just like the state right now, all money is not allowed to be used for lobbying. This would also apply to counties and local municipalities. None of their money can be used for lobbying. It's for those other groups that may get an appropriation that want to still be able to lobby. Let's say that the Towns Clerks Association, so just pick a different one. They want to lobby. They get some money from the state. They do some trainings, right? And they have that money in a separate bucket that they can then use that money for lobbying, right? And so that would be the example, but no state money. They could just come and give information as a member of that municipality and not lobby. Thank you.
We have lots of pink cards, and it's okay.
Sure.
For the trainings,
Sure.
for anybody.
Yep.
What money do you think is paying for that? It's all tax dollars. All of it.
Question in there?
Yeah. I said, whose money is it?
Okay.
Thank you for the question. The trainings are for different. Some municipalities may be paying for the trainings, but it's not required under statute that they be paid for by the state. So that's and they're not for lobbying. They're for trainings. So
Thanks very much.
That would be
I think we're good.
Oh.
Appreciate you introducing the bill.
thank you very much.
Chair would call Representative Keith Amon, please. Welcome to Legislative Administration, Representative.
I see some friendly faces here. Good morning.
They're all friendly faces.
For the record, my name is Keith Ammon. I live in New Boston. I represent New Boston, Lineborough, and Mount Vernon, and it's Hillsborough, District 42. I'm a co-sponsor on this bill. I won't repeat many of the points that Representative Yokela mentioned. I do want to say that I find the compelled speech argument very compelling, to reuse the word, that people are paying taxes for lobbying efforts that sometimes and oftentimes work against individual taxpayers' interests. And I think that is probably the crux of this bill. If you live in a town or a city, that town has many departments, right? It has a select board or a board of aldermen, planning board, school board, on and on and on it goes. Every one of those departments in your municipality has an association that they pay dues into using taxpayer money. Those associations all cluster within about a mile from here in what used to be called the local government center. If you've ever strolled through that hallway in that building, there's offices after offices after offices of all of these associations. They're all clustered in one spot for the most part. And I find that interesting that it's basically an industry that's popped up around dues from these different town municipal departments, sometimes in the millions of dollars collectively across the state. And they send their lobbyists here to the different committees that we serve on for $100 a year. That's what we get paid. And these people get paid maybe $60,000 a year, $80,000 a year to come and lobby for particular positions that their association takes. It's gotten to the point when you submit a bill to OLS, to Office of Legislative Services, OLS will send that bill, the pre-draft of that bill, to some of these associations. They get to weigh in on the fiscal note. They get to put their finger on the scale before the bill is even released. They're treated as if they're part of the government, and they're not. They're private organizations. An institution, the prime directive of every institution is to perpetuate itself. So these institutions, these entities may do good work. They may serve a useful function, but they're not entirely unself-interested. They have their own self-interest to perpetuate, to grow their membership, grow their influence. And they're doing it for a large part with taxpayer money. The questions earlier about trainings, information, tracking bills, none of that's lobbying. They can still do that. They can still provide help you with your fiduciary responsibilities as a selectman. They can provide you with information. It's when they put on the orange badge and they come to our committee rooms and they don't have, when a department head comes before you, they usually say, we take no position on this bill, but we have some questions, right? They don't do that. They take a position and they advocate for a position, and they're doing it with taxpayer money. So the people on the other side of their position, the people who oppose their position, are being forced to fund their own adversaries. And I think there's an issue with that. So that's my contribution to the conversation. Thank you for hearing the bill.
Thank you. You will take questions. Representative Costabile.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative, for taking my question. Would you still be in favor of this bill if, say, we amended, maybe we have questions on the enforcement part of the penalties, and lessen the penalties or maybe even eliminated the penalties? Would you still be in favor of that bill? Is it still a net positive there, or do we need the penalties?
So we can always increase penalties at a future date if there's an issue. I would say look at the current RSA that Representative Yokela referenced and sort of match what is happening already with whatever enforcement is currently in the statute. That would be my suggestion.
Representative Hobson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. Could you repeat the statistic that you just mentioned about OLS sending off? Was it LSRs, and is it before they are released to the public, before they're released to the committee?
Yeah, it's happened to me on several occasions recently, and this is kind of a new phenomenon as far as my experience. You put in a bill, it may have an implication for municipalities, or or some other schools or whatever it is, right? And the association, the private association that is not part of the government, is treated as if it's a department of the state. And they get to write up a fiscal note. It's attached to the bill that everyone reads, and it puts their finger on the scale. No other group gets that kind of advanced weight added to their opinion, and I find that kind of offensive.
Good. Should that be a separate bill? Where fiscal notes, whether
It
they
should
go
be.
to
I'm giving you an
agencies or not.
example of. So I'm focusing on lobbying. That's what this bill's about.
I understand.
So, what other lobbyist gets to write their opinion into the fiscal note that's attached to the bill and circulated to everyone that reads it? Like there isn't another. So, maybe that would be a separate bill.
This was just a conversation
Yeah,
between
yeah.
you and I. No one else was listening. It
Yeah.
was just about whether there should be a separate bill.
We'll have to put that one in.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Representative Sellers, saw him first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, and I'm going back to Representative Hobson's point of view. OLS, I thought those are supposed to be private and secure and not given out at all. I know the bill or the LSR itself, but even the fiscal note would indicate that, hey, this is a bill that's happening. Have you actually seen this? Have you?
Absolutely.
You
I've
have
seen it
seen
this term on my bill.
Okay.
So I think the way it works is you have to request when you file as a legislator, you have to request that the bill remain private. I think you have to take that action. So, and I did not do that, but
Done? Representative Payer, sorry.
Thank you. I would like to see if you had an opinion about, this committee has received many letters from various towns throughout New Hampshire, Claremont, from city councils, selectmen boards, town managers, town Salem, for example, Claremont, for example, and a bunch of other towns. And they are in opposition of this bill. Do you have could you give a brief opinion or whatnot as to why all these towns would be in opposition of your bill?
how many towns did you hear from? Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
Okay.
that would,
So why would I imagine that? I think maybe some dust has been stirred to have them write those letters. That would be my speculation.
okay, I think we're out of questions. Thanks very much, Representative. Chair's going to suggest to people, we have quite a few pink cards, as you can see. We have lunch in there somewhere. I just would like to suggest to people that it would be best for all of us if the prior speakers have said something that you agree with, you merely say that you agree with, rather than telling us the same thing over and over again. It would be great if we had new information when we came. My only caution, well, so far. Chair would call Jennifer Pike, who asked for 3 minutes. It would be great if it was less. Supports the bill. Welcome to Legislative Administration. If you could introduce yourself, it would be great.
Good morning. Thank you. Oh, yep. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Jennifer Pike, and I am from New London. And I have a 19-year-old son with multiple complex disabilities. And I would like to speak to how how this impacts families with disabilities and the poverty industry that it creates. All of the agencies that these lobbyists represent, have a financial in input, um, uh, or a financial financial reason for uh, wanting our business. And there's a lot to gain from our families financially. And unfortunately, what they are doing is, with all of the agencies surrounding our families with disabilities in particular, is they are keeping our families in poverty, because that is what benefits all of these agencies. And so these lobbyists are not interested in what is beneficial to the families per se. They are interested in what is beneficial to them, financially speaking. So, they will sit there and they will say that they are fighting for families with disabilities all the time, but they are not. They are looking at the bottom line for their agencies. So there are many people that are on different committees that should not be there because of different conflicts, very severe conflicts of interest. And are privy to information that and have power, again, that to make decisions for families, that is just, again, keeping all of us basically locked in this poverty situation, most of which are single-led families, like single moms with kids with disabilities. And what I can suggest to you, just so I don't have to go on and on, is if you want to get more information about it, you can read. There's several books or few books on this and several books on it. But if you want to refer to The Poverty Industry by Daniel Hatcher, it is very well outlined, but it's all about the monies that are going to all of everywhere except for the families that need it.
Great,
So,
thank you.
and the inflated salaries that are obscene. So,
Except ours.
so.
Would you be willing to take questions?
Yes, please.
Representative Sellers.
Yeah, thank you for taking thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for taking my question. I think you brought up the ethical issues in towns, probably anyways. Have you actually seen like a conflict in that area yourself personally, or this is something been told to you?
Oh no, I have seen it. I have experienced it. I have walked it. I have, it also, in addition to the being locked into the poverty industry, it expands to all of the programs that are created, that, all of these wonderful programs that are available for everyone across the state. and I apologize for the little bit of sarcasm. um, there's hundreds of programs that are available. But when, in reality, when you go to access these programs, they aren't available. So you are turned away. You are too complicated. You, there are so many reasons why you cannot access these programs. They just are not available, and I would really love to know why or where these millions of dollars are really going. I mean, obviously they do fund you know, the lawyers on the other people that are accessing or, working in the programs. However, there's a surplus of funds as well that are supposed to be, again, going to the families.
Okay. I,
Just want to get clear. So basically what she's saying, if I understand it correctly, is the towns are giving these public funds to lobbyists, which are, say these benefits are available to people, but then when you go to get the benefits, they're not actually there.
Right.
Thank you.
great.
I can give you some examples of the programs that,
If you could provide those offline, that would be great.
okay,
Thank you very much for your testimony.
you're welcome.
Chair would
Thank
call.
you.
Chair would call, and I'm hoping I'm reading it correctly. Allison Knowles. How'd I do? No. You knew who I meant, though, right? Okay. What? Could you please introduce yourself?
My name is Allison Nab. I'm from Rockingham 12, which is Stratham over in the Seacoast. I'm also the vice chair of the Stratham Select Board and have been on the Town Conservation Commission for about 15 years. You have received a letter from our town in opposition to this bill, but I just wanted to come speak against it as well. The budgets in our town, as in most towns, are set by town staff and the select board, the budget advisory committee, and are authorized at town meeting. These funds can be used to keep us informed and participate in the legislative process as any industry impacted by legislation set by the State House. This legislation affects many things for a town, including things from meeting minutes to zoning ordinances, and it is impossible for me to imagine that our town select board, planning board, conservation commission, town staff would be able to follow legislation on their own and to advocate for it, to come here and advocate it for it. I think this letter we wrote you is probably one we've written, maybe like we've written 3 in 5 years. So having an organization that helps keep us informed on legislation and to advocate for us is extremely important. And lastly, I'll just say that I think a bill that that includes penalties and charges against volunteers in towns will have a chilling effect on the volunteers that keep our towns running. So that is another matter of concern about this legislation. And I thank you for your time. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Representative Constable.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking the question. Who is the us that is being advocated for? And does that include the town people as well?
Yes. I mean, obviously, like in every town, our town select board, planning board, committees are trying to make the best decisions possible for the town, and keeping us informed on legislation that's going to impact us. It's incredibly important. The townspeople. It's part of the reason I ran for the State House. I felt like the long arm of Concord kept knocking on our door with new regulations and decisions that impacted our boards, our committees, and our residents. Thank you.
Representative McCarter, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. Where you're very involved in your town governance, obviously. Does your town segregate funds specifically per chapter 15?
Remind me what chapter 15.
Well,
are you asking if we segregate the funds from the state?
Yes.
It's a part of the bill right now.
Oh,
but
to
it
segregate them.
Yes.
No, it already exists.
It already exists in
15.5
law.
asks you to segregate
Then I
state
imagine
funds.
we do, although I'd have to check with our finance administrator, but I'm sure we are compliant on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank
Thank you
you.
for your
I'm sorry for not calling you earlier. Your card didn't indicate that you were a representative. Yeah. Chair would call Anne Marie Banfield, asking for 3 minutes and does support the bill. Welcome to Legislative Administration.
Good morning. I normally am in the Education Committee, so it's nice to be here. My name is Anne Marie Banfield. For the record, I am a parental rights advocate in New Hampshire focused on education, so I'm going to probably speak more to your School Boards Association, School Administrators Association. The practice of using tax dollars out of the school budget for lobbying takes money away from public education, so we need to be very clear about that. I would imagine that most taxpayers have no idea that their money is going to pay lobbyists who oftentimes lobby against what they support. This is a big scam on taxpayers. Teachers must pay their representation. Why is it okay for money to be taken out of the budget to fund lobbyists for the school boards and administrators? I've been advocating and lobbying on behalf of parents throughout New Hampshire for about 15 years. Oftentimes, these two organizations will offer opposing testimony. They are paid out of the school budget. I've never received a dime. Everything I've done has been on a voluntary basis. This kind of lobbying by the NHSBA and the NHSAA is not representative of all taxpayers who fund these two organizations. Schools are not funding lobbyists for teachers or parents out of the budget. The NHSBA and NHSAA take political positions that their funders do not support. That is why we have a problem with this, because I know that that question came up earlier. If this is going to be acceptable, then this budget should be open up to everybody. They need to be paying every parent that comes and testifies. Why is it that we're discriminated against when it comes to funding lobbyists? How about paying the parents who come for special ed? How about funding parents who just come and speak? Why is it just some get to lobby for their political positions, but nobody else can? I consider that viewpoint discrimination. I follow legislation. I'm on my own, and I follow a lot of legislation, so I'm not sure why that's so difficult for these towns. I could use a secretary, but I don't have money for that. These organizations, I think you brought up earlier, do other things, and that, again, is not part of this bill. So if they want to, I know the NHSBA proposes model legislation for schools. But that model legislation is being challenged at the Supreme Court right now. So it's costing the school money to fight a parent who's suing the Manchester schools over model policy that they suggested to the school, which they did withdraw. They did withdraw their support to NHSBA. But all policies at the school should be based on federal, state laws and rules. You shouldn't be able to pull out model legislation because they're supposed to be based on state laws. So I don't even think we're getting our money's worth when it comes to what they're doing in terms of offering model legislation. But again, this applies to lobbying, and I think that if we're going to have lobbying, then if you don't accept this, then how about a bill that opens up paying all of us? Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? I have one.
Sure.
In your travels in 15 years, have you run into instances where school boards or school administrators weren't aware of laws that passed that maybe weren't enjoyed by the school administrators or the school boards association? Have you heard of information not being passed if it was not favorable to to the school administrators or to the boards?
So basically what you're saying is that if the law passed, it's supposed to be put in policy, correct? And if it didn't get put in policy, have I seen that? No, I have not seen that, but I have seen the opposite with the JBAP policy, where the policy, if you looked at the bottom, it always cites laws. And if you actually read the laws that it cited, for instance, in the JBAP policy, under the privacy section, it says for school personnel to hide information from parents about their children. This is why it's being challenged at the Supreme Court. There's no law that says that schools should be hiding information from parents. So that model policy was not based on any specific law that says, hide or lie to parents about information about their children. So the opposite I've seen. That makes sense.
Representative Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Have you seen through the years where, in your case, focusing on schools, districts, one district giving, many districts give to the SBA, for example, and the SBA would lobby for one position over another position, so basically one district wants this and the other district wants that, but the SBA has to take a position on one or the other.
No, I haven't seen where that is split in terms of, because if somebody would come in from a school district and come before the or before a committee, they would probably be speaking on their own behalf. I do know that obviously they take a position. I think the anti-bullying position several years ago, I supported it because it would hold schools accountable for gross negligence if they were ignoring bullying. And then the school board's administration or the school administration, this has been several years ago, so I'm trying to do this by memory, I think opposed it at that time. But I can tell you that the parents of kids who were bullied, we had parents testifying, were supportive, because one girl was thrown down the stairs at the Manchester school, and when they sued, they got nothing because there was nothing in the bill. So there is a major conflict oftentimes based on what they're presenting with what the people who pay their bills believe or support.
All set. Others? No. Thank you very
Okay.
much for your
Thank you.
testimony. Chair will call, trying to alternate here if it's not clear. It's kind of difficult to do. Chair will call Kimberly Hallequist. How'd I do?
Perfect, well done.
Welcome to Legislative Administration. You represent the town of New London.
New London, yes. Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Good morning. I am here representing the selectmen of the town of New London, who asked that you oppose this bill. New London has been a member of the NHMA for decades and has always felt that the taxpayer funds spent on membership has resulted in many times that amount in savings as direct result of the advocacy of NHMA. Most towns and cities could not afford to devote staff time to researching bills and then sending staff here to Concord on a regular basis to express their municipality's support for or opposition to bills that would impact their communities. Most towns have all they can do to keep up with responding with the many citizens who come to our office, the city hall or town hall, call or email. We simply can't provide you with the information that you need to be effective legislators without the assistance of NHMA. With the pooled resources of the towns and cities in New Hampshire, municipalities and their citizens can have a voice in Concord for a very modest amount of money. This model saves taxpayer dollars, and we urge you to oppose this bill to support elected municipal officials and their taxpayers. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there questions? Rep. McCarter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for taking my question. You're from New London?
Yep.
Does the town of New London segregate funds per RSA Chapter 15.
Not that I'm aware of. You mean the question on the state funds that come in, rooms and meals tax, transportation funds? Yes, not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming up here. New London, right, is what you said, okay. As a member, you're a member of the New Hampshire Municipal Association. Is there any sort of rules or prohibition or requirements as a member that prohibits you as a town to come up here and fight against a position of the organization to which you belong to?
No.
Okay.
I would feel, the selectmen in New London would feel free to come and speak if they were opposed to something that NHMA was advocating. Is
Gotcha.
that what you mean? Yep.
That's exactly what I mean. Thank you.
I'll follow up on that. Would it be, do you understand, or is it your reading of the existing, of the bill that, as it stands now, that it would prohibit you from testifying in the future?
I think that that's a good question, Mr. Chairman. I kind of wondered about that because I am paid by the town, so the government money is paying me to be here at this moment. So I'm not a registered lobbyist, so perhaps I could still come here, but I was wondering that myself. Yes.
One last question. Have you ever run into time when you have, as a select board, requested input or had a discussion with the reps or senators that live in your district on legislation?
Absolutely. Representative Ebel and Wolf, yes. I'm in contact with them as well.
We are too.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. No further questions. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Chair would call, I'm gonna murder this one too. Maura, what is it? Ryan. Maura Ryan?
Would be me.
Thank you. I apologize for your.
Not a problem. My name is not English, so my parents have a good sense of humor. My name is Maura Ryan. I'm a member of the public, and I'm here to talk about support for this bill. I personally don't know Representative Yokela. Representative Sodi is one of my representatives from my area, but I wanted to say that I don't want my taxpayer dollars going to fund groups like NHSBA, which often express opinions that are contrary to my own and to my son's education. I have a son who has autism. This is a little loud. They never make these for short people. My son and I have been involved in a brutal battle, which has emotionally left me completely bereft, because my son deserves an education. The state promises him an education. They say he's entitled to an adequate education. And I had to go 20 rounds with my school district to try and get him what the federal and state law have promised me. I have come up here to testify on bills. One of my bills, which I wanted sponsored, was SB 381, which went before the Finance Committee, a committee which I am not allowed to testify in front of. And the lobbyist, NHSBA, was right there front and center. And not only were they allowed to testify before the Finance Committee, a committee to which I was able to give zero input, 2 lobbyists from the audience agreed to write an amendment for that committee on that bill. And they wrote a bunch of stuff for themselves in that bill. So I don't appreciate that. And I'm making that clear right now. I have seen lobbying organizations put loopholes to make it so that schools don't have to follow the law. I've seen them make interpretations of the law that are not accurate. I've been to some of the trainings and I've seen their interpretations of the law. And personally, if I were if I were elected to represent the people, I would want to know what the people think, not what some organization thinks. You can still go to their website. You can still read their opinions. They do take positions on bills. I track bills. I do it through you guys upgraded the system. You can now just check off a box and you get an email. It's very easy. I want to tell you at present, 4% of students on IEPs will have any opportunity for post-secondary education, yet the greater majority of them receive regular high school diplomas. Why is that? I sit on the State Advisory Committee for Special Education, and we have a lobbyist on that committee. I also believe that these firms like NHMA were formed by members, and they were for towns to discuss issues within the town members. They're no longer represented by members are the towns and the people are members of them, but they're run by attorneys. And the thing that attorneys like to do best is create more work for attorneys. In my town, we have attorneys redacting right to know requests. We don't need attorneys to redact right to know requests. The attorneys are probably laughing as they're paying a temp $7 an hour to black out a name. So I am here to support this bill. I'm going to follow up with written testimony because I'm running out of time. But I also want to tell you that I had done some research on whether or not current laws were more in line with lobbying groups or the actual constituents. And current research shows that laws are more in alignment with lobbyists, which represent a minor portion of the population and not constituents. I am happy to take any questions, and 100% I support this bill.
I appreciate your testimony. Representative Payer. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I missed what town you are from?
I'm from Londonderry.
Londonderry. Okay.
Yes.
And have you participated? What? Yes, follow up. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Have you voiced your concerns within your town during the budgeting process?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. And how did that go?
That did, they actually did not really acknowledge that. The school board said even if I got the votes to override it, that they would do it anyway.
And do you know the amount of
Follow up?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm new on the procedurals. May I ask another follow up?
Yes, one more.
Oh, okay. One more. Thank you. Do you know the dollar amount that your town pays for these items that you're concerned about?
It's actually very difficult to track because not only is it NHSBA, it's business administrators, superintendents organization, special education organization. I know NHMA got almost $1.5 million from towns last year in dues alone.
From your town?
From the state as a whole.
Okay.
Thank you. Further questions? Representative Hobson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony. You obviously know this well. I'm having trouble keeping up with you. Can you repeat the statistic you mentioned about the IEP students and the number that graduate?
4% will have any opportunity to go into post-secondary education, including the babysitting program at community college.
I think you said you were submitting testimony. Is that
I
correct?
will send in a written testimony because I was running out of time, but yes,
Thank
I can do that.
Great,
Okay,
thank you. Any further? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just a quick bookkeeping note. If members feel the need, we're past noontime, if individual members, not all at once and leave me here, but if people want to slip down and grab something in the cafeteria, that would be great. I will stay here. We do have nine or 10 additional pink cards. So, but not all of you jump up and run. Thank you. Chair would call Representative Ayers, who supports the bill. Welcome to Legislative Administration.
Thank you. And it's actually oars. I occasionally have both oars in the water, but I mostly operate on one.
I was misinformed.
That's quite all right. So I would just like to see if I can add to the testimony we've already heard. Listening to Representative Yokella and others, I would like to raise a couple points, a couple issues. One, it sounds to me as though an inquiry is required and needed as a minimum as to how funds are being handled and accounted for by towns and municipalities. Representative Tierney, it sounds like this legislation could help or hurt his cause. And it's obvious that from what I've heard in Representative Tierney's testimony and others, that this is a beneficial service for him. However, it sounds like the money is not being properly separated into different colors of money. And by that, I mean, as a former government auditor, money is put in different buckets for different uses. And it may be blue, red, white, whatever yellow color the money is. But if the money starts to get mixed into a different bucket and now we can't tell what color it is, that is totally inappropriate. And I was in a situation where a president and vice president of a company mixed that money and lost their job. So as a former auditor, I would say that this definitely needs to be looked into. In addition, it sounds like what's happening over at the LSR arena also needs to be looked into. As far as I understood, matter of fact, I read it this morning, I believe, in an email that was put out, that this is supposed to be private. Only those that are sponsors, co-sponsors, etc., should have this information. And if this information is leaking out to lobbyists, somebody's hand needs slapping. And with that, I think I'm finished. I'll take one question.
Who gets it?
You do. You're the chair.
Your town,
Chichester.
Chichester, are you aware whether your town A, segregates the funds as they're currently required in law from state sources, and B, does your town get in touch with you about issues that are affecting the town, that are asking you to represent them when you come to Concord?
So because I like you and I do
It
know
was
math,
two
that was
questions.
2 questions. So with that, yes, I was actually at the pre-budget meeting for our town last night, and they do separate these kind of monies out to the best of my knowledge from what I remember seeing and looking over the budget. And number 2, they don't need to reach out to me, so I'm reaching out to them. But it would be nice if there was something going on that somebody would tip me off.
But there is conversation, there is a pipeline for your town to get their feelings known here in Concord through you or your senator?
I would hope so. I really don't have. Let me start again with that answer. So one of the constituents in my town asked me to show up at a school board meeting. And that same constituent was there in the meeting last night and thanked me for coming. So I would hope there was a reason why they're asking me to show up at these meetings.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Representative Wars, have a nice day. Chair would call Mary Smith, who supports the bill and is looking for 2 minutes.
I'll be brief. I am Mary Smith of Manchester, New Hampshire, and I am not a lobbyist. I'm just a person. I took time out of my day to come here to testify on this bill and to others, and that's time I could have been spending on the job site right now, painting a home so that someone can go live in it in Manchester, but instead I'm here. And I've done this on multiple occasions, not getting paid to do it. But what really grinds my gears is when I am up here and I take this time out of my day that I could be a productive member of society paying taxes, and instead I'm here and my testimony is succeeded by and preceded by individuals from these organizations like NHMA, but not just NHMA, for which they hold entirely contrary opinions on the legislation that they get to express at my cost. And that's just ridiculous. That's like absurd. And I really appreciate that there were people here who are getting paid right now at this testimony to testify against this bill who, you know, I don't want to be paying for them to be advocating against what I want as a taxpayer. If they want to come here in some unofficial capacity where I'm not footing the bill, that would be great. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And so that's the first major point I'd like to express in this testimony. And the other is I wonder how many towns that sent in letters to this committee also mentioned in those letters that they clearly segregate these funds as what is currently law in 15.5. So if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to take them because this is not hypothetical. It's not hypothetical that like, oh, hypothetically, there are people whose interests are being counter-represented with their money here. It's actually happened to me as someone who is not a lobbyist here in Concord.
Thank you. Are there questions? I have one. Have you ever tried at the local level to not have the funds paid by to lobbying organizations? That have you ever tried to have that removed from the budget?
No, I have not gone to the the matter is different for cities than towns, I think, and I don't know. I could bring this up in the next local meeting in Manchester about if they do this, and if they don't, if they'd be willing not to. But my understanding is that NHMA doesn't give their members the opportunity to not do this. That NHMA doesn't ask members, okay, would you like us to not allocate any funds to lobbying? And if they did, oh, well, that would be great. And then I would advocate that the aldermen that represent me and the mayor choose not to. But to my understanding, NHMA and perhaps these other organizations do not give their members the opportunity to earmark those funds in that way and say, oh no, we don't want any money to be spent towards lobbying. Does that answer your question?
It certainly did. Representative Sellers has a follow-up, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Have you been to a budget meeting and where they actually present the budget, like a budget hearing in the past?
I've reviewed the documents online, but I have not physically myself been in the meetings for Manchester.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. Chair will call, trying again to get the opposition. Up, hold a second. We have a request for a 5-minute recess. Be back at 25 past. Thanks. Okay, we're back. Chair would call David, it's either Karan or Karen or, sorry. Please introduce yourself. Welcome to Legislative Administration.
Back in Canada with my grandparents, it'd be Caron, but I call it Dave
Caron.
Karen. I am the town administrator in Derry, and thank you for inviting me to speak, and thank you for your time. I think we all can agree that this process here throughout the legislature is about a sharing of ideas and information. And I think it behooves and benefits all of us, the legislature, towns and cities, and our citizens who we serve, to make sure that we do that in the most efficient way possible. So to provide some additional information is that every community and state is a member of NHMA. And every other year, we go through a process called the legislative policy process, which essentially groups 3 different committees dealing with finance, general administration, and land use and environmental to look at policy positions to present to all of our members. The combined participants in that process represents 75 communities, fully 1/3 of all of our folks. They go through a process whereby they have meetings, and then we have what I call as NHMA's town meeting, where every town and city in the state has a seat at the table to review these policies, and they vote on them. They also adopt what they call guiding principles. Essentially, if there's any legislation which doesn't fit to one of those categories they discussed, our professionals at NHMA comes back and compares that legislation against the principles. If they're still unclear, then the professionals will come back to the board of directors, and we meet monthly to review the legislation and request direction from us. So you can see it's a really bottoms-up approach, and I hope you agree with me, it's very transparent, and also it's very efficient. Now, removing NHMA from the process will just reduce the efficiencies of the process. Instead of having a coordinated process in which all communities participated at the outset, you're going to have a lot more people here testifying, like I am today, in which I'm not back in my hometown doing equally important work. Second, on the question about fiscal notes, I don't know what the process is, but I would think for efficiency, it would make a lot more sense to get NHMA's input into those, which has a subject matter expertise and has the input of all the organizations, as opposed to going out and trying to get information from 234 cities and towns. Because I think at the end of the day, we're all looking for good government. And I think, I'm not quite sure what the impetus for this bill is, but I know the end result is there's going to be less communication. There's going to be more information falling through the cracks. And the not so good government, not the good public policy we're trying to create through this process will be not as good as it was before. So I stand opposed to this bill. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there questions? Representative Hobson.
Thank you for taking my question. I was wondering, what position do you serve on here, just as Derry Municipal?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm the town administrator, and I serve at the pleasure of the 7-member elected town council.
Follow up.
Follow up.
And may I ask, is that a full-time position in
Yeah,
Derry?
yes, I'm
It is.
appointed. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Full-time plus some.
Representative Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned a few minutes ago that there'll be less communications, but I'm seeing yourself here, and I saw another select board member here. It seems like more towns are coming up. Yeah, more people are going to have to, I agree, more people are going to have to come, but that seems to me that it's more communications. Would you agree or disagree on that? I'm not following your reasoning.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I suspect if there was one municipal issue, or maybe even a half dozen during a session, it wouldn't impact our operations. Where you have, as you know, dozens upon dozens of legislation which impact municipalities and its taxpayers, then it makes sense to us to develop this central clearinghouse of information and supported by the professionals in HMA.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. You do realize this bill is not saying they can't do lobbying. They just have to have that money to pay the lobbyists from another fund, right?
I do see that, and I just question where those funds would come from in a realistic manner. Which just won't happen.
Further questions? I have one. Oh, Rec McCarty, go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. So are you suggesting that the a recent discovery, and I noticed it too, as recently as last week, that two of my bills, the fiscal notes were either previewed or created by the New Hampshire Municipal Association. Are you suggesting that our practice of doing that through our Office of Legislative Services is an appropriate relationship when we, as the representatives, are supposed to be presenting legislation that is for the benefit of our constituents? Is it do you submit that this is an appropriate relationship for them to have preview legislation?
Yeah, let me not comment on a relationship because I don't know much about the process. My point is very simple, is that before a committee or the legislature considers any legislation, you should have the benefit of the best available information. I think we can all agree to that. So whether NHMA representing every community in this state provides their information at the beginning of the process or at step 2 or step 3, I don't know about that, but the legislature should have the benefit of that information at some point during the process.
Further questions? I have one. We have some testimony that we received in by writing that questions duplicity, whether there are dues being paid to, and we seem to be circling in on NHMA, but I think part of that is from the people that are testifying. If all the cities and towns are members of NHMA, are there other within your town? Are there other groups of people that are also members of NHMA that those dues are paid for out of the taxpayer funds as well? And this was pointed out of the county as well, that they too may be also a member of NHMA. So in the letter that we received, there were 3 separate organizations that all were paying dues to the same organization. Is that possible in your estimation?
Thanks for the question. I'm sorry, I'm confused. I didn't follow it along. Let me see if I can. Town of Derry pays dues to NHMA. We have like the Chief of Police Association, in which the chief has a line item in his budget for that association. And so they all have groups that advocate, not advocate's a bad word, to support them in their training and their conferences. I don't know how much advocacy they actually do, but
are they also? I apologize for the confusion. Is the county that you belong to also a member of NHMA, and are any of the cities and any of the town offices also members of NHMA? Is it possible you could be paying multiple memberships to NHMA?
Well, I don't believe Rockingham County is a member of NHMA, and
Okay.
we don't pay dues to the county's association.
Okay, thank you. Representative Tierney.
Not a question, but an answer to what you just asked from NHMA's municipal director.
I'll read that.
Okay.
Thank you. Representative Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to follow up on the chair's question, do any of the departments, police, fire, highway department, conservation committee, along with the town, do they all or may all pay into NHMA, for example?
No, Town of Derry gets one bill,
Thank you.
and it's their responsibility responsive to all of our departments.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Chair would call Matthew representing YAL. Welcome to Legislative Administration.
All right. All right. Ladies and gentlemen of the New Hampshire House Legislative Administration Committee, thank you for taking the time to.
Could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes. My name is Matthew Sauce. I live in Manchester. This is my first time giving testimony before this committee and before the State House. Just to roll back a little bit, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, thank you for taking the time to hear my testimony. Thank you to each and every concerned taxpayer that has showed up in support of this bill today. Having said that, I'll begin. Taxpayer-funded lobbying is where public officials use public dollars to advocate for public policy. Thankfully, Representative Yokela has introduced a bill to address this issue. That's the kind of legislative change that I support wholeheartedly. Taxpayer-funded lobbying is an egregious misuse of taxpayer dollars that is undemocratic, goes against free speech of the taxpayer, and is one of the reasons that we have continual corruption in government. How is this a violation of taxpayers' free speech? Given that the interests of citizens may differ from their governments, citizens' legislative lobby efforts towards state elected officials might be adversely affected by the disadvantage they face when contending with the agenda of taxpayer-funded lobbyists hired by these political subdivisions. Additionally, those taxpayer-funded lobbying efforts often take positions contrary to taxpayers' policy preferences. As an example, homeowners may prefer lower property taxes, while a tax jurisdiction may be employing lobbyists through an association to protect or even raise these property taxes. Here are some issues that taxpayer-funded lobbyist groups like the New Hampshire Municipal Association, I'm going to have to pick on them again, support that the average taxpayer might find contrary to their belief system. Of the issues that the publicly funded NHMA addresses that actually relate to municipalities, here are some that your average taxpayer may not agree with. The NHMA supports the authority of municipalities to regulate or limit the use of firearms on municipal property, to regulate the carrying of firearms by municipal employees while on duty. The NHMA also supports the ability to recover reasonable labor costs and other costs for responding to voluminous or excessive record requests. The NHMA also supports greater flexibility in the processing of absentee ballots, all pulled directly from the NHMA website. All issues that are paid are stances paid for by your average taxpayer through local funds, to their local boards, to the NHMA, to lobbyists. Do legislative advocacy groups like the NHMA that receive funds from towns and cities exclusively lobby using those funds for issues related to these towns and cities? No. And I'm happy to provide a few examples, again, pulled directly from their website. The NHMA supports legislation amending motor vehicle registration enforcement laws to ensure the collection of all state and local registration fees owed by New Hampshire residents. The NHMA also supports legislation that protects and preserves local natural resources and public infrastructure, builds community resilience, and fosters adaptation to climate change and mitigates its risks. The NHMA also supports legislation and policies that encourage creative and flexible approaches to meeting housing needs of current and future demographics in different regions. Again, all pulled from NHMA's website. I'll say it again, this is a corrupt practice that allows for egregious spending, misuse of taxpayer dollars, violation of taxpayers' free speech rights, and a potential inhibition for the average citizen's advocacy efforts to prosper. This bill is not meant to limit a selectman or a public official from engaging in the public process. It's meant to prohibit them from paying lobbyists to do their job for them. For all these reasons and more, I support House Bill 1479 in its entirety, and I'm going to encourage you all to do the same. Thank you for allowing me this time. Thanks.
Written testimony, do you have that you can submit to the clerk?
Yes, sir, absolutely. I don't have it with me right now, but I can certainly submit it.
That'd be great. Thank you. Further questions? Representative Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you believe, or you believe at this point that the nonprofits are these outside agencies that the towns would give money to don't necessarily always represent the people?
Absolutely. So the issue here is that it's a free speech violation where these towns and these municipalities, obviously you can win a 51-49 race, and these committee members and these selectmen can use the taxpayer dollars of people that might not completely agree with the positions that they're pushing. So it's a way for public officials to use taxpayer dollars to compel the speech of their taxpayers, where they might not always agree with the issues that they're pushing.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
testimony. The chair would call Bonnie Ham, I believe from the town of Woodstock, who opposes the bill.
Thank you. I didn't indicate I was going to speak, but just listening, I've just.
Please first introduce yourself
Yes.
for the YouTubers that want to know who you are.
Okay. I am Bonnie Ham. I am a resident of the town of Woodstock. I have been a member. I am not currently serving, but 18 years in the legislature, and I have been a municipal official for 52 years. I've served on all of the boards throughout the town, throughout the school district. My opinion, and this is my personal opinion, is that New Hampshire Municipal Association serves the same exact people that the members of the legislature serve. Everybody. All of the towns and cities in the state of New Hampshire equals the same exact people that the legislature represents, the same exact people. So I find New Hampshire Municipal Association, speaking on behalf of the towns and cities, valuable information and valuable input as to what the cities and towns think, what they need to do their job, which is a different level of government, but it is government also, and they're trying to meet the needs of the same exact people we are trying to meet down here in the legislature. You know, I hear the individual rights when you get involved in personal liberties and individual rights. It gets a little difficult because the Municipal Association is looking at the global picture, everybody, what is good for the environment, what is good to run the town under, to provide a quality of life. I find them very trustworthy. I find them a very valuable resource of information. Now, maybe there's a way to them not being perceived as having as much impact, such as perhaps weighing in on the fiscal impacts of bills. Maybe that needs to be changed. If there's an exception there, and they're the only ones that are weighing in to that degree, maybe that shouldn't happen. I don't know. But I think there's got to be a way to salvage this and hear from the New Hampshire Municipal Association in a meaningful way, because they're well-intended. They're speaking for us as a state and as a town. And that's just my personal view, and I feel strongly about it. I feel very strongly about it, and I have 52 years experience observing and using and participating in their processes and their organization.
Great. Thank you very much for your testimony. Would you take questions if there are any?
Yes, absolutely.
Are there any questions? Representative Sellers.
Sorry, I gotta ask. Thank you, Honorable Ham, and thank you for serving the legislature
Thank you.
52 years, 3. In all those years, have you ever seen maybe a decision from, and we're still picking on NHMA, but on any of them. So the town of Woodstock would want a bill that would go this way, or advocate for a bill that would go this way, but the city of Manchester wants to go this way. Have you ever seen that?
Well, that could happen, obviously, because there are regional differences. There's different economies, different. Where I live, we're in the northern part of the state. We might be more interested in preserving the environment and making sure we've got roads to get there, so the tourists can come see us. And Manchester or Concord or Nashua might have a different perspective. But I've been very, very, very involved on the regional planning commission level also. And I have found in general, what is good for one is good for all. There's a lot of things you got to look at from a Woodstock point of view. And if you're a Woodstock official, that even isn't your first priority. But you got to consider it. I had a friend that always would say, a rising tide rises all ships. So what is good for Manchester is good for Woodstock. It's one state. It's a small state. So a town like Woodstock can kind of go along with something that seems like it might benefit Manchester more than Woodstock, and vice versa. If it's good for the state, it's good for jobs, it's good for the economy, it's good for providing a place that people want to live, that people want to visit. What's good for one is good for all.
I think you might have disagreement with a place like Dalton. They may think that Manchester doesn't speak for them, but thank you very much, Representative Payer.
Hi, thank you for being here. Would you, since you've been in local government for so long, does your town do town meeting format?
Yes.
Can keep going, okay. And if your residents didn't want your town to spend money on a NHMA or whatever within their budget, would they be able to vote collectively, majority rule, to take out those dollars?
Absolutely. My particular town got mad at an organization, not municipal association, but another one, and we stopped paying dues for a while because we weren't happy with them. But we went back after a while, and we went back. So it's absolutely optional on the town level. Ultimately, the voters decide. The voters of Woodstock decide where they want to spend their money. And this isn't answering specifically that question, but I also have served on.
Let's try to answer
Okay.
their question. That would be good.
All right, thank you.
Thank
But
you.
yes, the voters can decide not to join.
Representative Costable.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. Are you telling me that at town meetings that the people can pull out just the lobbying effort, not the dues to NHMA or any other association, but specifically what we're talking about here is lobbying efforts? I am not aware that lobbying is a separate line item that the people can take out.
I don't think they could amend, and they could amend the warrant article to send municipal association less money. I mean, they could take out that line item. It's in the budget. By the time you get to town meeting, it's in the budget, and it's probably under the selectmen's budget, most likely. And somebody from the floor can say, well, I only want to send New Hampshire Municipal Association half as much, and I want to send a message that I enjoy their legal services and their other programs they have, but boy, I don't want to pay for their lobbying. Somebody on the floor could make that motion and say, I'm going to cut it in half so they don't have any lobbying money, and you selectmen, you better tell them so.
Representative McCarter, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Low blood sugar, I think.
So are you suggesting that a member of the public, a resident in Woodstock, for example, could, by warrant article, petition the town to cut their membership dues in half? Or some arbitrary figure, because it was my understanding that the fees paid by the municipalities to the New Hampshire Municipal Association are strictly derived from population. So can you clarify that for me, please?
It's in the budget. I mean,
We do have a pink card from the Municipal Association, maybe a good question.
it's prorated based on population. Manchester pays more than Woodstock. But yes, a citizen can put in a petition with 15 signatures if that's the ratio needed. And I think it is in Woodstock. I want you to include this warrant article, and the warrant article can say anything that's germane, of course, to municipal government. They can't bring up topics that have nothing to do with running a town or a budget, but yes, they can. Unlikely, it doesn't happen a lot, but it can.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Chair would call Nancy Biederman. Supports the bill.
Yes, I do. Hi, Nancy Biederman. How you doing?
Welcome to Legislative Administration.
Thank you. I'm usually over at Education or Health and Human Services. Former teacher here, 15 years. And I would like to remind people that we have the type of government that we have is a representative government. We have a constitutional republic. So the people vote for their representatives, which are all of you sitting here. And we expect that you would represent our opinions and our concerns when we contact you. As far as I know, and as long as I've taught U.S. history, lobbyists were not part of the Constitution. And I have sat in many meetings and hearings over the last 2 years. And it's pretty sad when I'm sitting there and I've taken time out of my day and I'm the only one there. And then there's 10 other lobbyists that are there. And then I look and I say, oh my goodness, my tax money is paying for them. And they're opposing it. Recently, I was over the education department testifying against obscene books that we are finding in the school libraries. And my tax money is being used by these lobbyists to say, no, we're going to keep them in the schools. This morning on my way here, I was listening to Drew Klein, who is the chair of the New Hampshire School Board Association. He has a nice little morning talk show. He said that New Hampshire has had per cost per pupil has gone up immensely. And when he's done research, that cost has gone to administrators. It is not going to the pupils themselves. Finally, we have a friend who has been watching this at home, and she just now got an email trying to figure out the dues and the fees and going to the New Hampshire School Administration Association. And it's immense. I mean, between the superintendent and the assistant superintendent, the total is over $14,000. And again, it's very hard to figure out exactly which is actually going to the New Hampshire School Administrators Association, because again, it's not spelled out section by section in the school board. But she was able, the person from the budget committee was able to give her some broad categories, and it's $14,000. So we're not talking $100 or $200 in the school budgets. And it's a lot of money. The town next to me, they just passed their budget for the deliberative session, and their taxes, if it gets voted on by the people, are going to go up over $1,200 this year. They can't afford it. Even though there was people there saying, look, I can't pay my taxes. I have to choose between taxes and food. And they're still spending more money than the residents have. And the lobbyists, I think a lot of that is behind that. So thank you. Questions, concerns, problems? Sorry, that's how I ended every lesson as a teacher.
It's the teacher in you. Representative
goes.
Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. So I think we heard from the administrator, Londonderry or Derry, I forget which town, but in any case, so the taxpayers pay the property tax of the town gives money to, to a NHMA, for an example. But we also divvy up money to each of the departments so they can spend money as well. And I think we heard from the administrator saying that, like, the police department will have a police department association they give. The library has the ALA they give to, right? So in essence, we're not just giving just to one organization, we're giving to a lot. Do you know, like, how many and about how much a town would actually give, or maybe your town?
That would be a great research proposition. I mean, it's everywhere. And we have to decide as a government, and you have to decide as representatives when we come and speak, whose voice holds more weight. And I would hope that a concerned citizen coming here and speaking to you would hold more weight than somebody that is paid. And I am not paid. In fact, I'm probably getting a parking ticket right now as I'm speaking to you because this went a little longer than I thought. So you try to guess when you come here as to how much. So we'll see how much my bill is for today. So
You try to figure out how long time you take on this end as well.
you weren't the only place I stopped at today. So
All right. Any further questions so we can get back to the parking meter? Seeing none, thank you very much
Thank
for your
you.
help.
which lobbyist wants to pay my parking ticket?
The fellow on the end over here will take care of that for you. Yeah. Chair would call William McKinney. Opposes the bill, asks for 3 minutes. I'm seeing building officials.
Yes, sir.
Welcome to Legislative Administration.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Bill McKinney. I'm the president of the New Hampshire Building Officials Association. We are a professional association that represents over 200 code officials, licensed design professionals, and even contractors in our membership. Our focus from the New Hampshire Building Officials is education on codes, and educating often legislators on what the needs are for the state as far as codes. The language contained in House Bill 1479 is very similar and has been introduced and presented in public hearings during the past 2 legislative sessions. If I recall correctly, each of those times, the recommendations from the committees have been to ITL, inexpedient to legislate. The term lobbyist, and this is one of our major concerns, in RSA 15.1 has a very broad definition, and combined with the State Attorney General's opinion, it would encompass many professional organizations and associations who aim is for education, not technically lobbying. Many professional associations, such as NHBOA, receive payments from communities for their code officials to be members of our association and to attend valuable training. The fees for membership to those associations are currently within annual budgets that the voters review and approve, whether it's through town meeting, deliberative session, or through town or city councils. There is a transparent and public process already to approve these funds in each community within our state. NHBOA also represents our members by providing input to legislators on bills that may have a positive or even a negative impact to building and life safety codes in New Hampshire. NHBOA and other professional associations are often requested by legislators to provide input from our members relative to legislative specific to our areas of expertise. Many smaller communities do not have the staff or resources to have their voices heard in Concord. Those communities rely on the professional associations to speak on their behalf on matters of great importance. The many professional associations do not receive funding specifically for lobbying, nor do they intend to lobby. House Bill 1479, while it may be well intended to target specific lobbying expenditures and to provide additional transparency, could also have far-reaching negative impacts and ramifications to many very valuable professional associations that help to keep costs for New Hampshire communities lower. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there questions? Representative Constable.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question, although I believe you answered it. My question would be to, how much does your association spend on lobbying efforts, um, on either a yearly or quarterly basis?
We do not spend money on lobbying efforts. Any of our representation that is here is by volunteers.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. By taking a position on, as an association, by taking a position on a bill, that would basically define lobbyists.
I agree with you that, and we do our best not to take positions. The problem is the options on our cards here are support or oppose. There is no neutrality.
Just to the point of clarification, I have plenty of bills that have no support, nothing checked. And we usually say neither supporting nor
I will
opposing.
remember that for the future.
Yep, good to know. Rep. McCarter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question in your testimony today. You indicated that primarily your organization provides education for your membership. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Do they have an option to select a membership tier that only provides education and there is no lobbying services included?
Again, we do not pay for lobbyists. We did it one time many years ago, and we stopped that effort. And we found it was much better for the legislators to hear from us, the code officials ourselves, rather than paid lobbyists. So there's no option to opt out of lobbying because we don't have funding for lobbying. But if I could continue, by what we're doing, by just me being here today, someone could say I'm lobbying. And that's not my intent. My intent is to show that this concerns here that could impact other people than, and I'll put the target back on NHMA because they seem to be the ones you're looking at. There's many more associations out there. There's the Health Officers Association, the Planners Association, and it continues that, they all come to you to try and guide you one way or the other on what's best for the state of New Hampshire.
Thank you. Rep. Costello? No.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. I really enjoyed listening to your testimony, and I wish there was a way that we could carve out issues or pieces that work and pieces that don't. But I myself have been on the testifying end of bills, on the sponsorship end of bills, where I guess I'm up against a lobbying organization, and I happen to know that they go directly against what taxpayers that put me into office want. So how do we look at this legislation constructively, I guess? Is that an interesting or answerable question in your mind?
I really do wish I had an answer for that. And I know, 2 years ago, I worked with the sponsor on a bill that was similar to this. And we attempted to try and find a way that, those associations that are, trying to provide information. And again, even by providing information, could you say we're trying to sway your vote or your decision or your position on a bill? I guess yes. But I think it's for you to decide on bills. You should hear both sides of the story, and hear from all parties, whether there's pros or cons, and then you should make your decision.
Follow up?
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question again, if you would. Isn't that what the hearing process is for? To listen to both sides rather than listen to lobbyists?
I do agree. However, when you get into the associations, if we're here at the hearings, are we being lobbyists? And that's, I think, a dangerous area to get into. And I think it comes down to that the definition of what a lobbyist is doesn't carve out professional associations as an exception. It groups them into that.
Rep. Payer.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I just wanted to ask a question, is that this is my first term in the State House, and I appreciate what you do. And I just wanted to say, were you aware that during our legislative orientation, Rep. Stephen Smith advised us that lobbyists were a good thing and that we shouldn't, as new representatives, we shouldn't admonish their presence and listen to what they had to say. I just remember that vividly. Thank you.
You are aware. Rep. Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And going on Rep. Hobson's question is, do you have any ideas or any thoughts on how we could separate or exempt certain organizations, associations, or something like that? Any, to make this so it's palatable to others?
Again, two years ago, I worked with the sponsor on this bill to try and come up with some language that could do that, but it's very difficult. It's difficult to do, and I don't know what the parameters would be to determine what professional association is exempt from the lobbying, other than to rewrite the definition of what a lobbyist is.
Thank you. The only question I have is, you seem to have written down testimony. Would that be possible to put into the
Absolutely.
record?
What I can do is I'll clean it up a little
Please.
bit. It's got some notes, and I'll sign it, and I can send it on to the clerk.
Perfect. Thank you very much for your help. Thank you
Excellent.
for coming and seeing us.
Thank you very much.
Chair would call Joan Dargy. Poses the bill from New Hampshire Cities and Town Clerks. Ask for 2 minutes. This is going to be good.
Hi, my name is Joan Dargy. I'm the town clerk in Milford, and I'm the legislative co-chair for the New Hampshire City and Town Clerks Association. I'm here today to oppose this bill for many of the reasons that have already been said. The city and town clerks, each town, we get dues of $20 from each of our city and our towns. We engage the services of Demers and Praisall, and I'll tell you, in a election year this year that we have 4 elections, looking at 1,000 plus LSRs is a little daunting, and thank goodness we engage them to do that for us. They kind of pare it down, and then we are able to focus on those bills that are important to us. One thing I did want to mention is that, as what Mr. McKinney just spoke to, we were concerned that if this were to pass, that as part of the New Hampshire City and Town Clerks Association, if we came to lobby, to testify on a bill, that we would be considered a lobbyist and therefore would not be able to do that. I think that everything else has been said, and if anybody has any questions, I welcome any questions.
Thank you very much for keeping to your 2 minutes. Representative Sellers, is that? Oh, it's just an automatic move, I think. Muscle memory. I do have one question. You engaged Darby and Pearsall.
Demers and
Yeah, I'm
Pearsall.
sorry, Demers and Pearsall. Do they bring your feelings as lobbyists here, or are they just identifying bills that are something that you should be aware of?
90% of the time, that's what they're doing. It's when we are not available to testify or something that we might ask them to speak on behalf of us.
Thank you. Do you also engage representatives directly?
We do, yeah, on occasion. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's not always that easy to access the representatives, that are specific to a bill. So we do what we can.
I see. Last question I have is, were you aware of the existing law asking for the delineation of state funds not to be used for
So I believe that probably most city and towns do this, but they're separated by a general ledger account. So I know that if we wanted to look at up in Milford, what is the total estate funds that were received, we could do that. But not, I wouldn't say it would be in a separate bank account.
It does require that.
Oh, so I don't believe
It's
there's a
not just a
separate
book
bank account.
entry. It
Right.
it does have to be.
But it could be, and I'll look back, I can check back at finance and check on that as well.
Great. I believe, without speaking for the sponsor, I believe that's part of this is to bring light the idea that there are existing laws, and some of those, I think by his letter to the Attorney General, is indicating that he doesn't believe many are following the existing law. So
Right. I mean, it would be easy enough to separate the funds. I mean, what
Mhm.
we collect is $20 from each city or town. And NHMA, out of all the town funds, I mean, it's like a $1,200 fee, plus or minus, depending on the population.
right.
Yep.
Thank you very much for coming. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
No further questions, right? Great. Chair will call Kathy Stacy, and I can read this card. Kathy is from the New Hampshire Association of Counties, opposes the bill, and has written testimony. Welcome to Legislative Administration.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Kathy Stacy. I am the Legislative Chair for the New Hampshire Association of Counties, and I am the 30-year Register of Deeds for Rockingham County. So the Association of Counties has been around for 49 years. We obviously have plenty of pieces of legislation that we follow and track. We do have a lobbyist that we do use, because currently right now we are monitoring 700 bills, and 103 in addition to that are top priority, obviously affecting the multitude of departments within the county. As you know, you're all members of the county delegation. You vote on our budget. The dues to the New Hampshire Association of Counties are included in that budget that you're voting on annually. We have always actively participated in the legislative process. I would say 95% of the time, our members are the ones who come and testify before the legislature. And it's not likely that our lobbyist comes to, unless it's nobody can actually get here, or it's the 11th hour. Possibly somebody's putting a non-germane bill amendment onto a bill that we need to oppose or support, what have you. We only testify with regards to legislation that affects county government, whether it's in opposition or in support. We are always thinking about what's in the best interest, and you got to remember that the people that we send to testify are the ones who are the experts in the field, whether it's corrections, nursing home, registry of deeds, the county attorneys. I mean, we have a multitude. The nursing home obviously is the biggest department, the most costly department. And, sometimes legislation is proposed that isn't, to me, totally thought through, because there's, consequences to many bills that they haven't been thought out, and they don't understand how it will affect the county. I'm more concerned as an elected official who gets paid by county funds that when I appear before any committee under this piece of legislation, I can be subjected to a Class A misdemeanor, right? My finance director, or possibly my treasurer, can be subject to a Class A misdemeanor because he signs the checks and it's county funds that pay me. I don't have, obviously, I've been told that I could appear here personally. Well, the problem with that is if I'm taking a vacation day, but I still get paid for vacation time, right, through county funds. You don't meet on Saturdays or Sundays, so I certainly couldn't come up here and say I'm coming up here to testify as a person and not as an elected official, because that's what I am, an elected official. And I do lobby. And I do lobby locally with my own reps. I did it 2 weeks ago with regards to this piece of legislation when my executive committee met. And we discussed this, and I gave them actually the handout that I gave you and discussed, my thoughts on this piece of legislation. I've also spoken to my 9, I'm from the town of Salem, and I've spoken to my 9 state reps with regards to this legislation as well. I feel it's my obligation to, if I have something that it's going to negatively affect, especially my office, you will see me up here testifying. To give you the information as to why it would be either beneficial or, in opposition to the best interest of the deeds office. Again, the Association of Counties obviously wants to educate and promote county government. There are a lot of things that we do, a lot of things that people don't understand that we do, but we play a significant role. And there are a significant amount of bills that are proposed each year that affect county government, county tax dollars, in our constituents. So obviously I'm here in opposition to this bill, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. And I want to, before I get to the questions, I want to thank you for bringing up the idea of whether you could come and testify. Went and grabbed the RSA, the books. There are specific, and it's not affected by this legislation, there are specific exemptions or exclusions. The following communications are excluded from the regulation imposed by this chapter of 15. And one is public testimony before any entity subject to 91A, public testimony before a legislative committee or subcommittee, communication made by a public official acting in the public official's, the official's official capacity. So I'm wiping out your concern if I can.
May I ask you which section that is in 15?
15.
15 what? 15.1, 15?
15.1,
Thank you.
Roman 5, and I read A, B, D.
Thank you.
So all of those are under the registration of who must register as a lobbyist, and all of that communication is excluded. So
Very good.
you're good.
Very good.
Any further questions? Representative McCarter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony, and thank you for taking my question. You're from Rockingham County?
Correct.
Yes. Does Rockingham County segregate their funds per Title I, Chapter 15.5?
Yes, they do.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Representative Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In your position, you said you're, what are you, register of deeds, you said?
Yes.
All right, and, so you don't see any conflict of interest to the taxpayers to your job you're doing? Because some taxpayers don't want lobbying, some do.
I understand that, but as I said, I mean, when I come up here to discuss a piece of legislation, it's going to be something that's going to be beneficial one way or the other to the people who utilize my office. I've also been approached, and I have also written legislation that's been proposed and passed here in Concord.
Further? No. Representative Payer.
Hi, thank you for being here. In your experience, when you've come in and spoken to different groups and whatnot, and then there's been votes, would you say that majority rules? So even if there's a vote and the majority votes in a certain way, then that, even though the minority may not be getting what they want, that democracy has occurred appropriately?
Oh, are we talking about the Association of Counties?
Sure.
Okay. So with the Association of Counties, my legislative group is about 90 people. We meet every Friday afternoon to talk about legislation. And then it goes to the executive committee. If we have a piece of legislation that one or another county is opposed to and others are in favor of, we do not lobby it. We don't. Hands off. If they want to come up and they want to lobby for something, that's up to them. But we do, as an association, do not get involved.
Good. Further questions? Senator Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarification on what you just said. So the action that the Association of Counties takes when it does lobby is on actions that the board goes through the process of coming out unanimous?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
One final question that I have. Are the are the individual counties also members of New Hampshire Municipal Association?
The only county I'm aware of that is an affiliate member is Sullivan County. That's the only county, and I think that then they get no advocacy from NHMA. It's basically for legal assistance and things like that. But the NHMA does not lobby for any county.
Okay. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you. The man with the Teflon suit. Thank you. Please enter and sign in, please. Here to oppose the bill from NHMA.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nate Grace for the Municipal Association. As I hope you all understand from context, we oppose this legislation. One of the services we provide our members is when they care deeply about legislation, we do deliver those letters to committees, regardless of what our policy positions are on those letters. As you'll see from the folders that you are now passing around, there are 35 letters from members, 35 different members, all of whom were opposed to this legislation. I do have one small correction to my letter that's in there, which is that I listed 32, but I got 3 more yesterday. So we have small towns like Fremont, large ones like Londonderry. You've heard from numerous other ones today, but my letter does summarize most of those. It doesn't have Auburn, Salem, or Swansea because I received those yesterday. It seems like the committee had a number of questions. I guess the first point I really want to make is that the bill in front of you has some pretty vague language in it. With respect to the chair, we have discussed the bill language with the 4 attorneys in our office, and we all agree that it is contrary to 15.5. If we were to provide legal advice to any member calling us about whether they could testify in their official capacity, we would warn them that they may, in fact, be subject to criminal penalty. There are additional concerns we have as well. There is a provision in there about being allowed to provide information. I don't think I need to say this, but I'm going to anyway, which is that it should be pretty clear based on the testimony you've already received today that we're opposed to this bill. Even if I were never to say opposed and I got up and just listed a bunch of things I don't like about it, it's pretty clear we're opposed to the bill. Same thing if we had a bill that we liked, get up and say 3 things about it that I like. Again, we would like that bill to pass. The word oppose or support is not, in our view, magical. It's actually the context of the conversation that occurs, and that's what we would be obviously concerned about. And you know, there has been some talk today about our organization and how it functions. I just want to be clear that we're a voluntary, nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We have a policy setting conference that I believe Mr. Karen described very accurately. That policy setting conference is done with our members. They tell us what they want us to advocate on, support, oppose. It occurs every 2 years while all of you are knocking on doors for re-election. Our members are meeting to decide what we should advocate for over the next 2-year period. And then based on that, we go out and we support bills or oppose bills. We also obviously track what members like, and sometimes members request things that we're not sure how they fit under our policy positions. So just to give you an example, one member requested this year a change to the groundwater withdrawal processes. That bill's being heard later today in Resources and Rec. We actually had to go to our board for further direction because we knew that was going to impact another member, and we wanted to make sure that we weren't going to advocate for something that was harm to another municipality. I think the committee's also had some questions on 15.5 and segregation of funds. That applies to lobbyists. We do follow the law as it exists now. And I guess the last point I really want to make, but I'm certainly happy to take questions, is that actually 2 other points, I'm sorry. There have been a number of questions about fiscal notes and how those happen. Honestly, that question is best reserved for the legislative budget assistant. From my perspective, what happens is we sometimes receive requests for information from the legislative budget assistant. Yes, it does have information that I'm not allowed to disclose, which may or may not be a draft of a bill. But I'm thoroughly warned I'm not allowed to disclose that. And what they're interested in is any information we can provide on financial impacts, whether that's going to increase revenues, whether that's decrease revenues, whatever that is. The instructions are very strict that you're not supposed to advocate on that. I understand that obviously if there is a fiscal note written, that could be advocacy. They have their own internal processes. I have zero control over what they ask me for information for. If any state agency asks me for information, whether it's the LBA, whether it's DES, whether it's, DOT, whoever it is, and I have that information, or I can direct them correctly, just as I would do for any legislator, I will direct you to that. That's what I do. If you'd like to change that process and remove us from that process, that's totally up to you. That's not something we do. That's internal to LBA and what they do. I just ask that you talk to them about it. And the last point is we do think that it's a fundamental right to speak to the government. And we think that it's really important that, that our members are able to petition the government, and they use us as essentially the microphone for that, or the megaphone for that. We do what they ask us to do, and we come before you with their positions, whatever those may be. And realistically, they can't always make it here, and it's frankly not always a good use of taxpayer money to pay for 3 different elected officials from 3 different towns to come here when they could just send me instead. It's just cheaper for everybody. And so we do oppose this bill. I think that the government does have a right to speak, and that's what we support. We believe that's constitutional. We believe that's a fundamental right under the Constitution. Happy to take questions.
Thank you for your question, for your testimony. Rep. Walls have a question.
I hope you can hear me. Sorry. I have a couple of questions. Municipalities can decide whether or not to participate as members of NHMA, correct?
Correct. And we've had in the past decade, I think it is, Salem and I believe the other one was Merrimack, were not members for a period of time. There was a shift in our policies based on our member input, and they decided to rejoin.
Follow up. Thank you. And municipalities can contact you if they don't agree with legislation?
Absolutely. As I said at the beginning, if they don't like legislation, but they want us to deliver a letter and say, hey, we know NHMA is opposed, but we support it, or vice versa, we do that. That's a service we provide.
Final question. How often do you hear from communities who are unhappy with what NHMA is representing?
Not very frequently, because of our policy setting process that they're all involved in. Typically what happens if they have a bill that they're very passionate about, so I'll throw the town of Conway under the bus here. The town of Conway is very passionate about doing something with hotel occupancy fees. That we don't have a specific policy position on that. We advise them to participate in the next, this upcoming policy process to see if, that's something that they could help use us for, and we could do more advocacy on, and they are going to participate in that. So,
thank you.
Representative Payer.
Hello, thank you for being here. In the packet that you passed out, I see there's a letter from the town of Fremont
yes,
that
there is.
opposes this bill and been CC'd to Representative Yokela. The last paragraph of the letter states HB 1479 threatens the core concept of local control. Do you have anything that you could elaborate about that?
Absolutely. As this committee has heard extensively today, the decision to join or not join NHMA or any other organization that then comes here and speaks to all of you is something that's decided at the local level through the transparent budget process. Any voter in any municipality has the option to work through that process to say, hey, I don't want our town to be a member of this organization. And as I've given you examples, they've done that in the past because they have not agreed. And so by taking that voice away from government, by taking that away from the people, that loses the opportunity to have people like me come here and say, hey, if you pass this legislation, there's going to be some sort of impact on the taxpayers of your town, is what we talk about a lot. We talk about, we want state aid, we want additional money, or if this legislation might have some sort of requirement, requires towns to do something, it's going to cost $1 million a town or whatever it is, we point that out. Mhm.
I should have done this earlier. We are to ask clarifying questions rather than, well, I'll just leave it at that. Rep. Constable.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. So we've had conflicting information. I've had both in public here today in this testimony and privately have been told that this is not about the information or the general services that you guys provide that they like, but they don't want to, the towns may not want to participate in the lobbying efforts, and that there are the people, townspeople can go to their meetings and pull out the funding. But the way I'm understanding it is that this is, there's no mechanism to pull out lobbying efforts, especially if you're not segregating what you're spending on lobbying or not. So is there a process to be a part of your association and not pay for lobbying efforts?
So our dues are calculated based on population and assessed value, and there's a formula for that. And it's just, you either pay to join or you don't join. That's the way it works. If you don't have to join, and certainly, again, we have an open process that members participate in to tell us what to advocate for. So that's how it works.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are you opposed to segregating lobby funds? Is the lobbying effort compared to, say, what a lot of the local select board and them, they really like the lawyer inputs on some of the stuff, and that has nothing to do with specific bills. And are you saying that it's essential to come here and lobby on bills as part of your association? Like, are you completely opposed to separating a lobby fund and what gets paid towards lobbying and then having it something separate?
So here's why we can't do that, because I don't know if you guys are going to run on time or not. And so if I'm supposed to keep track of my hours, as I do, and we report that to the Secretary of State's office, and that's available, I don't know how much of my salary to bill to lobbying versus the other 4 jobs that I have, providing legal advice, doing trainings, etc. I only know that after the fact. So I don't know in January, June 15th comes, am I going to spend 600 hours here? I'm going to spend 700 hours here. How much time am I going to spend here? And unfortunately, this isn't a shift job. I mean, if everything ran on time, I'd love to come in, talk for 15 minutes, bill that out, and leave. That would be really easy. We could figure that out. But that's not the way this works. I have to sit here for as long as these hearings take so I can come up and answer questions and provide the information I can provide. We do the quarterly reports. We do everything else. So you see that in retrospect. We just can't predict how long it's going to take. We can't predict how many bills are going to affect municipalities that we have to spend time on. So I just can't do that.
Representative McCarter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. Could you explain to me a circumstance where it would be appropriate for every town in a county to belong to your organization through dues, but also the county as a whole belongs to that same organization, so the taxpayers are paying twice? Can you explain why that would be an appropriate circumstance?
So we have both our full memberships, which are cities and towns, and then we have associate memberships, which are counties, village districts. We provide different services, so we only advocate on behalf of cities and towns. We do not advocate on behalf of counties or village districts. But what the associate membership gets them is they can come to our trainings. We do a lot of trainings that overlap with kind of the same laws that counties need, and the counties association doesn't necessarily do the same type of trainings. But for example, in Coas County, there are a number of I don't remember the name of, but there's the county planning planning board that occurs up there, so they need to know what the land use statutes are. We provide that training. It doesn't really make sense for the counties association to provide that as much because we do that with 234 cities and towns. So different services, mostly the training side of things is what they're accessing. And again, that's all voluntary, so you could always choose not to have your county join if that's what you're interested in.
Follow up.
Follow-up question. Thank you. It's actually not a follow-up to this, but it's a follow-up to something you said a little while ago. In your testimony, you said something to the effect, I want to make sure I understand your position, about the government having free speech. And I don't think you intended to mean that the Constitution protects a government's right to free speech, because it does not provide for that, as you're probably well aware.
Well, I think there's a right to petition the government. And I think that, when a group of people get together, they form an organization, and that organization can petition the government on behalf of those people. And I think that's a fundamental right that's enshrined in the First Amendment.
Representative Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you know what the total revenues are for NHNA?
Not off the top of my head, but I could get that information for you.
Thank
Follow
you
up.
for a follow-up, yes. Do you know what the total revenues, first of all, do you get other revenues besides the city and towns and counties? Do you get any private revenues, any other revenues from big corporations or anything else like that, or corporations in general, anything?
So our entire revenue, the vast majority of it is the membership dues, and then local officials come to our trainings. Some of those they have to pay for, some of those are free. Those paid ones are obviously also paid for by the cities and towns. And then we sometimes have sponsorships of trainings in order to offset some of the costs. So like our annual conference, we have, I don't know, like 4 different law firms and some other entities that sponsor that, and they get little booths and kind of standard stuff. I don't know what the breakdown is, but I can follow up.
Please. Yep.
Yeah, just for clarity, I'm just wondering, do you get other monies from outside of government? How's that?
Only in the context I just gave you. Like a law firm can't just give us a check for $1,000. We would not do that. That's not. They'd have to have some relationship to what we're doing.
Representative Payer.
Okay, I'm gonna need your help if this is okay for me to ask.
I'll be listening.
Okay. I'm just curious, can you give a little bit of information about your background of your education to work in New Hampshire Municipal Association?
Sure. So I'm an attorney. I was originally hired to work in the legal services side of things, and I was not previously a municipal attorney. I was actually a prosecutor for several small towns. So I'm an attorney, so I have a law degree, learned municipal law, worked with cities and towns to train them over the few years, and then the person who had this role before me, he retired, and the position opened up, and I was selected.
How many years have you been doing this work as an attorney? Like,
How many years have I been an attorney?
yes, I'm sorry, how many?
I have been an attorney for, I think, 11 years now. 2013 is when I was sworn into the bar.
Right, sorry.
Mhm.
Low blood sugar, sorry.
Know what that's like. Rep Constable.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again for taking my question. Can you shed some light on how the association comes to decisions based on membership, and with in the context of representative next to me lives in a large town. I'm in a very small town, so the money coming in is disproportionate. So how do you balance let's say rural municipalities versus the cities, where the cities are paying far greater to the association than say the rural? How do you protect the rural municipalities?
Sure. So thank you for the question. We're obligated to represent everyone to the best of our ability. So when there are clear divides. So, for example, in the education debate, whether there's donor towns or not donor towns, that's something we can't get involved in because it divides municipalities. So we try as much as possible to make sure. And as I gave you the example earlier with the groundwater withdrawal processes, we had to go back to our board for that because we said, look, the context in which this came up was one town was concerned because the town next door was drilling a large well. We don't know whether that's going to cause some sort of conflict. We can't be in a position of pitting town against town. So we had to talk with our board to see what our position would be on that bill, if any. And so we try to make sure that when there's that conflict, we don't get involved in those because we need to represent everyone to the best of our ability.
My turn. So my first question is there somewhere we can go, or can you provide for us a list of all of your clients beyond the cities and towns?
I don't have any clients other than cities and towns. You mean
Count-
like
counties,
associate members and everything?
Yeah,
I can follow up with you on that. Yes.
that'd be great. Then I have a question of, I asked the prime sponsor earlier, and I would like your opinion on the idea of whether this legislation and maybe some of the existing legislation might be in incorrectly placed within the lobbyist section rather than in the cities and towns, and what money can be spent on within that cities and towns section.
I'm not sure I follow. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
So the idea that money can only be in here, there are specifications of where money can, what state funds can be done with in order to purchase lobbying services. We had an example earlier where it may be that the lobbying firm may not have any idea where the funding is coming from to pay their services. So I'm asking whether, for purposes of location, maybe this is in the weeds, but should the exemptions or the exceptions of what can be purchased with state or local funds, should that be in the section on cities and towns, not in the section on lobbyists?
Well, Chapter 15 applies to lobbyists, which would
Right.
apply to me. It does not apply to cities and towns. So if you're contemplating a different change as to what authority cities and towns have, that may be appropriate somewhere else versus what my role is.
Right. Okay. Won't belabor that. I think you answered the question about whether funding could be withheld from a city or town if they chose not to have lobbying services. And you said that could not be done.
Correct.
Correct. And the last question I have is the formula that you have for charging premium. How is it that pick two towns, Londonderry and Merrimack? Are they aren't there services that they're receiving the same within, regardless of their population? Is it not true that their ability to ask you legal questions or do training or any of those things is the same regardless of their town population?
So our dues are calculated on population and assessed value. Obviously, it pertains to our budget because you have to pay for staff. So if all towns were to pay the same amount as Freedom paid, we probably wouldn't be able to have a staff because that's just not a very high number. So that budget is set by our board of directors, which is comprised of local officials. So they're the ones who oversee that. If you want more information about how that process works and everything, I can certainly ask my executive director to follow up.
Are all the associate members the same rate, or are they also by that formula?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I do know village districts used to be a set rate of, I think, $500 a year. I don't know if that's true for counties, and I'm not sure if that has changed.
Okay.
But I will follow up with that information.
I'm told it's in there. Anybody up? Representative McCarter?
Real quick, I promise.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So are you suggesting that a town, say like Derry or Londonderry, larger population, higher property values, and then comparison to a town like Freedom, New Hampshire, are they able to access the same level of service? Do they get prioritized because they pay a higher dues, or everybody gets access to the same information or resources that your organization provides, regardless of population or dues?
We don't change, like everybody can call our legal services. We just have our internal, how you process these, which we try to turn around, answers to questions for general legal advice within 24 hours.
Great. I think we're all set. Appreciate your
Thank you.
Your patience with us. With that, I have no other pink cards. I'm closing the hearing on 1479. Just for committee purposes. So the plan is we have canceled the exec session for this afternoon. We did that first off. The thought process is we're going to try to move everything that we didn't do today on the exec session, well, obviously into the future, but most of them would be next Wednesday. So watch your calendars. I will also, if anything changes on any of that, I will try to speak to you tomorrow in session. Representative Sellers.
Is there a preference on morning or afternoon on exec?
Oh, that's
All
right.
day?
We didn't really, we seem to have a, you don't particularly care for mornings, right? We do have a, more to come. The ranking member and I will have to have a conversation about it, I think, but we'll do our best to accommodate everyone. No lobbying. No influencing my vote. All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.